Today on Psycast, we'll talk about how disappearing can change your life. This episode is presented in podcast format, with subtitles to help you follow along with calm and clarity. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt the urge to vanish? Not to run away forever, but just to stop being available to everyone. To let yourself fade from the noise, the demands, the performance. Maybe you've even done it already. Logged off, stopped answering, pulled away without a word. And maybe, in that silence, something deep inside you whispered, "I disappeared to survive." There's something sacred about that silence. Something that goes beyond fear or exhaustion. It's the moment when your soul takes over the steering wheel, even if your mind hasn't caught up yet. When Jung talked about the process of individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are, he often spoke of withdrawal, solitude, and inner confrontation. He didn't mean escapism. He meant transformation. Because sometimes the person you've been is too entangled with what others expect, and disappearing, even for a while, becomes the only way to peel off the layers that were never yours to carry. You're not weak for needing space. You're not dramatic for pulling away. You're not selfish for choosing silence over explanations. You're just human. And your nervous system, your spirit, your tired heart, they know when enough is enough. We live in a world that punishes stillness, that equates visibility with worth, that asks you to be present, productive, and pleasing at all times. So when you start to vanish, even quietly, people notice. And often, they panic. Not always out of love, but out of discomfort. Because your disappearance confronts their own fear of being left alone with themselves. But here's something I've learned the hard way. Not everyone deserves access to your presence. And not every presence you've kept deserves to stay. Disappearing isn't always about others. Sometimes it's about you needing to hear your own voice again, to remember how it sounds without the echo of other people's expectations bouncing off of it. It's about facing the mirror, the inner one, and realizing how far you've drifted from yourself. So no, you're not broken for needing to vanish. You might actually be healing, quietly, courageously, from the inside out. Disappearing doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, almost invisible to the world. You stop initiating conversations. You stay offline a little longer each day. You cancel plans not out of laziness, but because the effort to be on feels unbearable. You go through the motions, but you're not really there. Not because you're lost, but because something inside you knows this version of life isn't sustainable. This isn't giving up. This is stepping away so you don't lose yourself completely. Carl Jung believed that the journey inward often begins with withdrawal. He called it the confrontation with the unconscious, the moment when we stop projecting outward and begin to face the parts of us we've buried under years of roles, expectations, and noise. When you disappear, you're not vanishing into nothing. You're turning toward everything you've ignored. You're giving space to the voice that's been whispering beneath your daily performance. The voice that doesn't scream, doesn't beg, doesn't demand. It just waits, patiently, for you to remember. There's an image Jung used that always stayed with me: the spiral. Growth is not a straight line, it's a spiral. We return to the same places, the same wounds, but each time with more awareness. So yes, disappearing may feel like regression, like going backwards. But what if it's just the next turn of the spiral? What if you're not breaking down, but breaking open? Think about it. The strongest transformations don't come when we're trying to impress, perform, or prove something. They come in the quiet, the mess, the in-between. They come when we let go of needing to be understood and start focusing on being real. Disappearing isn't a failure to cope. It's often the first step in choosing something deeper than coping: healing. And healing isn't linear. It isn't pretty. It doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it looks like sitting alone in your room for hours, feeling like a ghost in your own life. Sometimes it looks like deleting every app, avoiding every call, letting the world run without you for a while. And in that pause, in that space where nothing is demanded of you, something soft begins to return, something true. You don't need to force it. You just need to stop interrupting it. There's a certain kind of clarity that only arrives in the absence of noise. It doesn't come through advice, distraction, or even reflection shared out loud. It comes when we finally allow the discomfort of solitude to settle in. When we stop reaching for validation and instead begin to observe the patterns we've repeated for years. Disappearing gives us that chance. The chance to look at our lives not from the middle of the storm, but from the shore. To see who we've become and quietly ask, is this still me? Most people don't disappear because they want to. They disappear because they've been disappearing inside for a long time, showing up half present, half alive, running on autopilot, while their inner world becomes quieter and more neglected, until one day, the cost becomes too high. And the only thing left to do is to step away, to stop explaining, and to allow the disconnection to do its work. Jung believed the psyche has a self-regulating nature, that it knows when something is out of balance, even when we don't. When we silence ourselves for too long, the unconscious begins to speak louder. In dreams, in anxiety, in inexplicable fatigue. The body begins to scream what the mind refuses to say. And often, disappearing is the psyche's way of pulling the emergency brake. It's not sabotage. It's a call to alignment. So if you felt the need to pull away, to vanish from the routines that used to define you, don't shame yourself. You might be answering a deeper invitation, one that comes not from weakness, but from wisdom. The wisdom of a soul tired of pretending, tired of saying yes when it means no, tired of chasing belonging in places that ask you to fragment who you are. When we disappear, even briefly, we meet ourselves without the mirrors, without the filters. We learn how we actually feel when no one is watching. We notice what we reach for when no one's expectations are guiding our steps. And sometimes we're surprised by what we find. That we're lonelier in company than in solitude. That we've been clinging to people who drain us out of habit. That our silence holds more truth than our words ever did. Letting go of the world for a while doesn't mean letting go of life. It means reclaiming the parts of life that got buried beneath the noise. And that's not selfish. That's sacred. There is something profoundly human about needing to step away to remember what it means to be alive. Not in the dramatic sense of escape or disappearance forever, but in the deeply personal, quietly revolutionary act of no longer offering yourself where you are not seen. Of no longer spending your energy just to be tolerated. Disappearing in this way becomes less about hiding and more about healing the parts of you that have been too exposed, too available, too diluted by the demands of others. We're not designed to be constantly reachable. We're not meant to carry the emotional weight of 100 interactions a day, the pressure to respond instantly, the constant feedback loop of being watched and judged and interpreted. Jung understood that the self needs solitude, not as an escape from connection, but as a foundation for it. A person who hasn't met themselves in silence will struggle to meet anyone else in truth. You start to notice in those quiet days what actually feeds you and what only drains you. You begin to distinguish between attention and intimacy, between being needed and being valued, between being seen for what you do and being loved for who you are. And this clarity doesn't come from talking about it. It comes from absence, from the bold act of not showing up just to be accepted, of allowing the world to miss you or not while you choose yourself for once. That's the thing no one tells you about disappearing. It reveals who looks for you when you're gone. It shows you who notices your absence, not because you're useful, but because you matter. And maybe, just maybe, it shows you that the one person who needed to notice you was you. We spend so much of our lives proving we're worthy of love, of belonging, of space. But disappearing pulls all that into question. If no one sees you, do you still exist? If no one validates your worth, do you still feel it? These are frightening questions, and also the beginning of freedom. Because when you learn to answer yes, yes, I still exist, yes, I still matter, even unseen, you stop needing the performance. You stop chasing mirrors. You begin instead to walk with yourself. Disappearing then becomes a kind of remembering what your voice sounds like when it's not edited to please. what your presence feels like when it's not performing, what your life could be if it didn't revolve around survival, but instead around truth. Eventually, the world pulls you back. Life resumes. The messages return. The noise finds you again. But something has changed. You're not returning as the same person who left. You're not stepping back into the current to be swept away. You're walking into the world with clearer eyes, steadier breath, and a self that no longer feels like a stranger. That's the quiet miracle of disappearing. It gives you back to yourself. It doesn't solve everything. It doesn't erase the pain or rebuild your life overnight. But it restores something sacred, your inner center. That part of you that no one else can touch, that doesn't shift with the seasons of approval or rejection. And from that center, life begins to feel different, more grounded, less desperate. You begin to make choices that honor your capacity, not your guilt. You begin to say no without apologizing. You start to trust that what is meant for you won't require your constant self-abandonment to be maintained. Jung called this process individuation, the path of becoming whole. And wholeness isn't about perfection. It's about integration, about welcoming back the exiled parts of yourself, the ones that had to disappear just to keep going, the one who swallowed pain in silence, the one who kept smiling to avoid conflict, the one who dreamed quietly because the world was too loud to hear. You don't need to keep them hidden anymore. You've earned the right to live as a full version of yourself, even if it means losing a few people along the way. And maybe that's the final truth no one prepares you for. Not everyone will understand your silence. Not everyone will welcome your return. Some people loved the version of you who stayed quiet, who stayed small, who never walked away. But those aren't your people. The ones who love you for real will not fear your growth. They will not guilt you for needing space. They will sit in the silence with you or wait gently on the other side. So if you're in that space now, if you've stepped away, if you feel distant, invisible, uncertain, please know this: disappearing doesn't mean you're lost. It might mean you're finally being found. It might mean you're listening to the most honest part of yourself for the first time in a long time. And it might mean that when you return, you'll never again forget who you are. Disappear when you must. Return when you're ready. And in between, trust that your soul knows exactly what it's doing.